Hi there. Let's begin this week by diving into something that many of us have felt, but few of us have had the words or science to explain. Why do certain relationships, or even small moments with certain people, trigger such intense stress and cravings? The truth is, relational stress, especially when it's chronic, like in difficult family situations, romantic partnerships, or high pressure work environments, is one of the most powerful biological drivers of cravings. And while it's often brushed off as just emotional, your brain and body don't see it that way. In fact, your nervous system interprets emotional threat in much the same way it interprets physical danger. A disapproving glance, an unpredictable outburst, even a subtle change in tone. These things can activate your survival response in a matter of milliseconds. That's because we're wired for connection. As human beings, we're social mammals. Our nervous systems are designed to co regulate, to stay balanced through safe connection with others. But before the brain decides whether someone is safe to connect with, it uses a built in scanning system. That system is called neuroception, a term from researcher Stephen Porges. It refers to the brain's unconscious ability to scan for safety or threat in things like facial expressions, vocal tone, and body language. And here's the important part. All this happens before we consciously think it through. If your brain picks up on danger, real or perceived, it kicks off a powerful cascade. The amygdala, your brain's alarm bell, activates first. It doesn't reason or analyze, it reacts. It sends a signal to the hypothalamus, which then flips on the stress response known as the HPA axis. Suddenly, your body is flooded with cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine. Your heart races, your muscles tense, you feel foggy or agitated, or sometimes you shut down entirely. But the biggest problem, this flood of stress chemicals also suppresses your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that helps with empathy, impulse control, emotional regulation, and thoughtful decision making. So, in that moment of stress, you lose access to the very skills you need to navigate the situation. You may not be able to think clearly, communicate well, or even stay present in the conversation. And this is where cravings come in. When your prefrontal cortex goes offline and your brain switches into survival mode, it looks for relief fast. And if your brain has learned that processed food brings relief, that's where it's going to turn. The dopamine system, the same one involved in all addictions, remembers that food has helped before. And studies show that dopamine isn't just released during eating, it's released in anticipation of food. So even just imagining the comfort of food in the middle of a stressful moment can calm the brain temporarily. That's not weakness, that's biological conditioning. Over time, the brain builds a shortcut. Stress plus relationship pain leads to craving, leading to food, leading to relief. And it's not just emotional. Research has shown that high sugar and high fat foods actually suppress cortisol, at least for a little while. That makes the craving feel urgent, not just like a preference, but like a need. Now let's add one more layer. What's happening inside at the level of the parts? In parts work, we understand that relational stress doesn't just affect the body, it activates protective parts, internal patterns that formed in response to earlier experiences of threat, abandonment, or even unpredictability. You might notice a hypervigilant part that starts scanning for what you did wrong, or a pleasing part that rushes in to apologize, smooth things over, or agree with things that you don't believe. A critical part might start attacking you internally for not handling the moment better. And a shut down part may just freeze, making it hard to think, speak, or even feel. And then, in the background, a craving part may quietly nudge you toward food because it remembers that food can interrupt all of this. None of these parts are bad. They're doing what they learned to do to keep you safe. They were formed in moments when connection felt dangerous, and they've been trying to protect you ever since. But in recovery, we get to do something different. We get to notice when these parts are active. We can pause. We can ask, what is this part trying to do for me right now? And just by asking that question, we re engage the prefrontal cortex. We begin to come back online. And when we meet those parts with curiosity instead of fear, when we offer them reassurance instead of rejection, we shift the whole system. The craving softens, the inner chaos settles. The body learns this moment is hard, but it's not a crisis. I can stay, I can listen, I can respond. This is where real relational healing begins, not with perfect communication, not with never being triggered, but with knowing what's happening inside you and offering that internal system exactly what it needs. Now let's talk about something a lot of people experience but don't always know how to name. When we're in recovery, we often expect communication to get easier. But for many of us, it feels harder at first. Conversations can feel awkward. Sharing honestly might feel risky. Setting boundaries feels impossible. That's not a failure, it's the brain waking up from survival mode. Addiction doesn't just affect our habits, it rewires how we relate to people. The systems that help us communicate, like attention, empathy, emotional regulation, they all get interrupted. And to protect us from feeling exposed, our internal parts often jump in before we even speak. These are the same parts that got us through difficult relationships in the past. They're not trying to block connection, they're trying to manage risk. In a healthy, regulated conversation, our nervous system relies on something called co regulation. That's just a fancy way of saying we stay steady by being with someone who feels safe. The brain reads cues like tone of voice, facial expression, or posture and decides whether we're okay. That decision happens automatically through a process called neuroception. If it feels safe, the brain sends out signals of calm. We release oxytocin, our trust hormone. Our prefrontal cortex stays online so we can think clearly, choose our words, and stay present. And our parts feel that too. They start to relax. When the nervous system feels safe, our internal system feels safer too. But when safety is uncertain, Our parts don't wait around, they take the wheel. Now, here's what happens in addiction. Over time, especially with substances like processed food, the prefrontal cortex, the part that helps us reflect and regulate, gets dialed down. And at the same time, the amygdala, the part that scans for danger, gets dialed way up. So instead of pausing and responding, we might find ourselves reacting quickly or shutting down. Even something small, like a raised eyebrow or a sigh, might feel overwhelming. And when that happens, our parts come in fast. The pleaser part tries to smooth it over. The hyper aware part starts scanning for what went wrong. A shutdown part might take over completely. These parts aren't overreacting. They're doing exactly what they learned to do when things felt unsafe. Another system that gets affected is our mirror neurons, the ones that help us read other people's emotions. When we're in recovery, especially after trauma or long-term stress, that system can go offline too. So we might misinterpret what someone means. A neutral face might look like judgment. A sigh might feel like rejection. And once again, our parts jump in, not because of what's happening right now, but because of what has happened in the past. They remember being embarrassed in a classroom, or rejected by a parent, or criticized by a partner. So they step in fast, trying to control, avoid, or manage the conversation before we get hurt. Every time we talk to someone, there might be a part doing the talking. There's the fixer part that talks too much to avoid silence, the over explainer that piles on facts to sound like they're in control, the apologizer that says sorry before anything's even happened, or the frozen part that can't find the words at all. These patterns didn't come out of nowhere. They were built in moments when being misunderstood or upsetting someone led to real emotional pain. And they've stuck around, trying to keep us safe from that pain ever happening again. But now, in recovery, we get to slow down and ask, wait, who was doing the talking just now? Without even realizing it, we might leave a conversation and think, why did I say that? Or why didn't I speak up? Often that's because a part was in charge. But with parts work, we start to gently notice those patterns, not to shame ourselves, but to build awareness. When we can ask, who was trying to help me there, and actually thank that part, we begin to loosen the grip. That tiny bit of curiosity is what allows a more grounded, adult voice to come forward. And that changes everything. Here's something important. We can't build new ways of communicating while our brain still thinks we're in danger. Before we can speak with clarity, we need to calm the system. Sometimes that is as simple as taking a slow breath, or putting a hand over the heart, or silently admitting, I feel scared right now. When we do that, we're letting our parts know, hey, it's okay, we're not in trouble. This kind of reassurance helps the prefrontal cortex come back online. It gives our communication parts a new experience, being seen, being calmed, being supported. Once we're a little more regulated, we can try something new. We can say what we really mean. We can name our own feelings without blaming. We can ask for what we need without apologizing for it. And here's the beautiful part. The more we do this, the safer it becomes. Our nervous system learns, hey, This didn't end in disaster. And our parts begin to believe us. They start to loosen their grip just a little. That's how change happens. Not all at once, but breath by breath and word by word. Every time we stay present during a hard conversation, every time we choose to speak calmly instead of react, every time we pause and check in with a part before replying, we are literally rewiring our brain. The systems that were disrupted by addiction, the ones for empathy, perspective, and regulation, they start coming back online. And inside, our parts notice. They begin to trust us. They don't have to hijack the conversation anymore because they see that we're staying, we're listening, we're leading in self. And in the end, this isn't just about learning to talk differently. It's about showing up, being seen, letting go of the need to control the moment just to feel safe. When we start listening to our parts, really listening, they stop shouting. And that gives us space to speak from our own voice. Not the pleaser, not the over explainer, not the avoider, just us. That's the voice that brings connection. And that's the voice that recovery makes room for. So let's reflect. Think of one relationship in your life that tends to activate your stress response. Take a few minutes to think about that relationship that consistently triggers a stress reaction in your body. What do you notice when you're around this person, physically, emotionally, or mentally? Try to describe the experience without judgment. The goal here isn't to solve anything. It's just to build gentle awareness of what your nervous system is picking up on. What signals does your body give you when you're in interpersonal overload? Everyone has a different early warning system for emotional overwhelm. Some people get irritable. Others feel drained and start craving food. What are your body signals that you're under interpersonal stress? The more familiar you get with these signals, the more empowered you become to pause and choose a different response. How have you historically coped with chaotic or emotionally intense relationships? Think back, especially to childhood or early adult years. When you felt overwhelmed by others' behavior, what strategies did you use to survive or keep the peace? Did you shut down? Did you lash out? Did you try to please? Noticing these patterns is a step toward understanding how they might still live in your nervous system today. What would safety in your relationships feel like, physically and emotionally? Let yourself imagine a moment when a relationship feels emotionally safe. What happens in your body when you picture that? Is there more breath, less tension, warmth in your chest, or a loosening in your belly? Write down any sensations, images, or thoughts that come up. This helps anchor your system to what safety actually feels like, not just the idea of it. If you've ever felt overwhelmed in your relationships or confused by how much certain people or situations impact your emotions, you're not alone and you're not broken. Your nervous system has been shaped by your experiences and it's doing its best to protect you. Everything that we talked about today helps bring that system into conscious awareness. Because once we see the pattern, we can start to gently shift it. We can bring in tools that regulate the stress response and reconnect us with our grounded self. In my next video, we'll dive into two of the most powerful tools for creating emotional safety: boundaries and letting go of the burden to try to fix others. These aren't just behavioral strategies, they're neurobiological interventions that can truly change the way your system feels in relationships. So, for now, take a breath. You're already doing the work, and we'll keep building on it together. Thank you for listening.